So this morning we're in studio and you're wondering who we're going to be having conversations with. And our show this morning, of course, is very, very informative as we go through conversations that are very relevant to our spaces, wherever you reside, as long as you're residing on the planet Earth, but primarily here in Trinidad and Tobago, we're going to be focusing on some very important things to us in this space. And we start the conversation by speaking with Officer Jude Rogers. He's a fire prevention officer in the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service. And then we speak with Dr. Cariel De Beek, Physiotherapist 3, as we celebrate Physiotherapist Week. So we do hope that you can stay with us as we have these conversations. We are in studio now and we're going to get straight into the show. Yes, we're going to start immediately. I have with me and on set Officer Jude Rogers this morning as we speak about Fire Prevention Week and the steps you need to take to ensure that your property is safe, of course, preserving your life in the long run. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Adanna. It's a pleasure to be here on the Isle of Tobago.
Of course, and it's a pleasure having conversations of significance and importance. And we're talking about Fire Prevention Week, and more than Fire Prevention Week, we're talking about how do we prevent fires and safeguard our property and our lives as well. And I know Fire Prevention Week is in October, but it is very important to start the discussion now and actually to keep the discussion in the public spaces so people can understand the measures they need to take. So tell us a little bit about, I want to talk about the statistics in our local space here in Trinidad and Tobago as it relates to fires, whether it's residential or commercial in our spaces.
Right, but first of all, let me take this opportunity to say that Tobago is definitely included in the statistics, and I want to bring some of those facts to you. Post-pandemic, we have seen an increase in the amount of residential fires that we have taking place in Tobago, not only Tobago, but also Trinidad and Tobago on a whole. And so I'm reporting to you that for the first 6 months of 2024, we've seen that the average amount of fires that we have per day has risen from 2 fires per day to 3 fires per day, with us rounding out the figures at 450 fires for the first 6 months of the year residential. And that doesn't take into consideration the commercial. So you can imagine the exponential loss that is being borne by the Trinidad and Tobago public as a result of this. And what I want to always say and remind persons is you may not see a fire happening in your jurisdiction, but trust me, somewhere in Trinidad and Tobago today, there is a house fire that is taking place, and the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service is there to try and treat with those situations as they arise.
I know you mentioned that there was an increase from 2 fires per day to 3 fires, and some persons might think it's just 1 fire, so it's not significant. But when you calculate cumulatively over the period, you do see an increase in the numbers of the fires, at the end of the period. So it is a significant, 1 fire is 1 fire too much.
Exactly.
Right? And so, of course, it is very important for people to have the education for fire prevention. I know that the the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service, they do a lot of, in terms of public education. You put stuff out there in the public domain, you have the conversations and help people through. There are a lot of things that we take for granted in our homes. Overloading circuits, for instance. I saw just earlier we were talking about some situations, and we were looking at the video, and I hope we could pull it up shortly, where your circuit is overloaded, and these things can lead to fires. So we want to talk about things that we can do to prevent fires in our homes, and the things that we can employ to ensure that we have a safe space.
Well, I'm glad you spoke about that. And yes, we were looking at the video where in the normal home, we have a number of electrical items that are plugged in. And most of the time, we call this multi-tapping. So you have multiple plugs plugged into one circuit. And what we understand from electricity and from the persons who are certified is that there's a particular amount of amperage that you should apply to one particular circuit. Normally, that ranges between 15 to 25 amps. And so when we add so many devices onto one circuit, we run the risk of increasing the resistivity on that line and the potential for increasing the heat. And that, once in touch with some sort of combustible material, you can have a fire ensuing. And so we see it in the video here, where the family is literally, they're surprised, but they were at least home to recognize. And so that leads me to one of the other major points. If you do not have a smoke detector, and you are not in that particular room, you will not be made aware of it. And so this year's theme for fire prevention is smoke detectors, make them work for you. And so every year we have a new team coming out of the international body, National Fire Protection Association, and we're focusing on smoke detectors in each home this year.
And it is very important, as you mentioned. What if they were not looking at this show on the television? What if they were all in their bedrooms playing their video games, as they do now, and they were not able to detect that? And so, of course, it is very important. And I know culturally, it's not something that we're used to here.
Yeah.
You'd see it in the Western world, in the United States, they have their smoke detectors there, and you have seen how it has prevented fires from expanding. And so now I want us to speak to the importance of integrating it into our culture, making it a norm for our homes. I know earlier we were also chatting and you mentioned the cost of this versus the cost of that. So let's get into that part of it as well.
Yes, it's good that you alluded to the fact that in relation to the cost of a home is now upward of $1 million in that vicinity. And you're talking about a minimal investment of between $100 to $200 per smoke detector. And I'm saying that you should install a smoke detector in each bedroom because that is where your sleeping risk is, as well as your corridors. And of course, well, you would not put a smoke detector in the kitchen because it will go off constantly, but there are battery operated heat detectors that can also be purchased, and you can apply that to your kitchen, giving coverage to almost every area in your home. And the thing about it is, Adanna, is in that first 30 seconds of a fire is when you want to catch that fire, and you can then make an interjection and you can save your property. Once it goes past that 2-minute period, you run the risk of it going beyond what an extinguisher can deal with. And so hence the reason why we've moved from just saying get an extinguisher in your home, but to also have smoke detection to give you that early warning so you can actually evacuate or you can attack the fire with a proper device such as an extinguisher.
So if I want to purchase a smoke detector, is there a standard that I should look for? And also, is it a possibility that I can get the support of the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service for the installation? The right guidance as to how do I install this fire detector?
Well, I was glad that you would have pointed that out because our focus this year is going to be on smoke detectors. The messaging that's going to come out of the fire service is how you can actually install, where you should install, when you should service it, when you should change the batteries, because a lot of people don't know. So I'll just give you a few tips right here and now. A smoke detector should last approximately 10 years. And by that time, you should be looking to change it out. There are some smoke detectors that you can interconnect so that when one smoke alarm goes off in one bedroom, the entire smoke alarm system goes off throughout the home. Because you may be upstairs and the fire takes place downstairs, but you may not hear the alarm. So we want to integrate those alarms. And now, Adanna, we have wireless systems. So I can, from my home, I can detect, because I have a wireless smoke detector in my home, I can get a message on my phone, and I can then alert the fire service who can then respond to my home. So there are so much possibilities, and that's why we're here and we're talking about it, because now you can actually integrate it into your software on your phone, on your laptops, and you can actually have that early warning device getting to you when you most need it.
And that is absolutely necessary in these times because one, we live very busy lives.
Yes.
We spend a lot of time outside of the home, whether we're working with activities, extracurricular activities as they call them, or social activities. So we outside of the home and things can happen. And so I like the idea of the wireless option where you can it's the same as having an alarm system on your house.
Indeed.
So you are aware of what is happening when you're not there. And so those things to me are very important. I want to touch a little bit also on fire extinguishers, if that is okay as well. I know we're focusing on detection, which is very important because, as you mentioned, that can prevent the fire from happening. There are different types of fire extinguishers, and of course, it is very important to have one because you never know. Let's say, for instance, you didn't get that 30 seconds. Right? And you're leading to 2 minutes now. You really need the fire extinguisher now, right? You need to get that fire under control. Yes. So can we talk a little bit about, I know you mentioned where we're going to install the smoke detectors, but how do we install fire extinguishers? How do we know what type to use for what type of fires?
Again, very, very, very important question. And so persons ask that question, and what we want to point out is that fire is classified into different classes, class A, B, C, D, and also F, or K for kitchen fires or fires that involve heavy oils and fats, such as KFC and those places that have oils. So what you want to have is the fire extinguisher that covers the majority of those classes. So class A, wood, paper, plastics. Class B, flammable liquids, and Class C, gaseous material or electrical-based material. And that particular extinguisher is a dry chemical or dry powder fire extinguisher. And we call it the ABC fire extinguisher because it handles fires under the classes A, B, and C. And so it's the most predominantly used fire extinguisher that you will see. And we have one right here in studio. And it's good that you have that because it means that you can now deal with the majority of materials that you have in your particular workspace. And that's what I would recommend. And the size, a minimum of 10 pounds. Because we want to ensure that when we start to use the fire extinguisher, there is enough extinguishing medium to last that 20 to 25 seconds to give you the best chance of extinguishing the fire.
You know, trust a fire officer to notice the fire extinguisher. I have been coming to this studio every day, and you know, I mean, I know it's there,
Yes.
but the fact that you were able to point it out, and even when we were chatting offset, you highlighted the smoke detector that we have in here as well. And you know, kudos to you. Of course, I feel the passion in your what you're doing because, of course, your job is very important. How do you know your fire extinguishers now? We spoke about where to install the smoke detectors. How do you know where to put it? Okay, so this is the one for ABCD, ABC, ABC, not D, ABC. Where do I put it? Where's the most convenient place to put it in the home, or the most practical place to install it if I have one in my home?
Definitely. A fire extinguisher should be placed in a position of safety, and the safest place in your home is going to be near your exits. So you always place your fire extinguisher in close proximity to your doors, the doors that lead directly out of your house. So that could be your front door, the kitchen door, or the back door, depending on how you set up your home. And so you always move from a point of safety to the point of the fire, which is the point of danger. Thus, ensuring that if you are not able to overcome the fire, you simply retreat to the door.
That's right. That's
so
right.
we never start you out in a place of danger. We always start from a point of safety and then work our way to the risk or to the hazard involved.
Well, great strategy there. I would not have thought of it until you said it. Then I see the strategy in it and the you know, the importance of it there and the relevance in our spaces. And you know, I want us to, as I mentioned before, develop a culture of paying attention to our environment, our surroundings. And I want viewers today that when we come off air this morning, you check around your home. You can even start doing it now if you're in your homes. Check around and ensure that there's no overloaded circuits. Ensure that, you know, everything is the way that they're supposed to be doing. You know, sometimes there are some circuits without a face.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Those things, we need to get those covered. We need to ensure that those things are done and sealed off to prevent
cords in particular.
You know, we need to make sure that we have our spaces are safe and that we are not contributing to the risk that could put us at danger.
Agreed. Agreed. And Adanna, one of the things that I think is important is for persons to know what are some of the major causes of fires, because knowing that allows you to know where you should be looking for the risk. And one of the major causes of fires is our electricity and how we interact with electricity. And so what we're asking persons to do is to stay away from activities such as running extension cords, running extension cords to leave it as a permanent source of electricity. Extension cords should only be used as a temporary means for electrical supply. So you don't want to leave a refrigerator or a particular unit on an extension cord for an extended period of time. That wiring is going to break down over time, and it's not designed for that particular purpose. I always remember the Christmas period. Adanna, persons put 15 string of lights on one circuit. And so what we're recommending that you don't go past 3 string of lights. All right, we always have to remember that a circuit is designed to carry a particular amperage. All right, and so there are many, many different tips that I want to highlight that will allow us to eliminate electrical hazards. But also there's the error of omission. Persons forget heaters on, they forget that they have the fan on, and if you have a fan that's close to a curtain and it sticks onto the fan, you have the possibility of that fan overheating and a fire can ensue. So these are some of the little tips that we give to persons, and we ask persons, be situationally aware. Be aware when you're leaving your home as well that you plug. Adanna, I plug everything out. And somebody said, you have the time to plug everything out. But what it does, it eliminates the possibility of what we saw in the video. Because if you're not at home, why do I need to have television, radio, everything plugged on at the same time? I could understand your refrigerator and other items that will be working when you're not at home. But there is no need to keep non-essential items on. and it eliminates the hazard in the process.
Yeah, and I know that fan thing. I know a lot of people who keep their fan, circulating for the entire day, even if they're not indoors. And especially how it's so hot these days. People are thinking maybe if I leave the fan on when I'm out, by the time I come back in, it might be a little bit cooler. But we need to pay attention to those things and ensure that we switch them off, because you never can tell what would happen. Are we really trying to prevent fires? Fire officer mentioned that the fires increase from 2 to 3. And as we mentioned, not because it's just one extra fire means it's just one. It's a lot. It adds up to the overall total for the period, and you don't want that one to be you. So you have to be very careful and alert and pay attention to your surroundings. Officer, is there anything else you want to share with us while we're in this conversation?
So I just want to implore members of the public, as we head up to the Christmas period in Trinidad, we have the Diwali period and celebration. It's a period where we see a little peak in terms of fires that can occur. Because once you have an open light in your home, there's a potential for a naked flame to cause a fire. And persons' negligence, sometimes we topple things over, and what do we do? So I'm saying that we should, again, respond. And there's one last thing that I'd like to share with you. As we look at these statistics, we recognize that the persons who are most at risk of succumbing to fire, death by fire, are our elderly, our disabled, and our very young. And so we paid attention to that, and we're going to be focusing on them this year as we bring the message of fire prevention, and we bring the whole idea of early detection and the use of fire extinguishers in our home. And by the end of our session, and by the time I'm back in Tobago, I'm hoping that the persons would have gone to the safety companies and they would have purchased the right equipment. It's just an exponential price in comparison to the cost of a home. But you can save your property, and you may even save your very life.
That's right. And while we go to purchase these items, can persons contact the fire service to ensure that they're buying the correct thing? Are there things that they need to look at, for instance, expiration dates on these things? What are some of the things you need to pay attention to when you're buying these devices?
So definitely what we talk about is the standards involved. So you want to make sure that the fire extinguisher has a UL listing. And even if you're buying electrical items, as for that matter, you're going to look for that is tested by a laboratory that is reputable. You also have the CE, which is the European Commission. They also have a standard for testing, and the US. And so once we utilize and we look for those standards, we can ensure that the item is going to be maintained. Of course, a fire extinguisher can last upward, renewed once you service it, upward of 10 to 15 years. So some of these investments that you're making are medium-term investments. It's not something that you're going to have to replenish every single year, but you certainly have to service them once per year.
Oh, absolutely amazing. And it really is, as you mentioned, the investment, because let's say an average of fire extinguisher is $400 to $500 and it lasts you for 10 to 15 years. I mean, you'll pay less than that. You pay about $25 a year for it, So if my math is correct, that is. And so the investment is worth it. At the end of the day, it's preservation of life and security of property. Fire officer, I want to thank you so much for joining us in studio this morning and bringing that measure of, awareness and encouraging us to be more alert and to pay attention to our surroundings so that we can prevent these things from happening. And, viewers, this morning, I want you to pay attention to your surroundings. As I said, walk through your home and make sure that everything is in check and that you don't run the risk of starting a fire in your home, even unintentionally. These things do happen. So do pay attention to all of that as we try to save lives and reduce the amount of fires here in Trinidad and Tobago. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a short break before we continue this morning. And as we go for a break, when we come back, we're going to head outside. Yes, we're heading over to the hospital, the Scarborough General Hospital, with Natalia as she speaks with Dr. Cariel DeBeek, Physiotherapist 3, as we speak about Physiotherapy Week this morning. So do stay with us while we go for a break and we come back with Natalia.